Hey everyone, it's another episode of Scent with Christian Holst, and I get the opportunity to interview Jeffrey Scogin. And Jeffrey is a counselor, and he uses nuthetic counseling to help so many people. And we want to talk the topic of why do we need counseling, especially men. So many men are dealing with mental issues and tough issues, and seeking wisdom is what the Bible calls us to do. So, Jeffrey, you've been doing this for 31 years, both in pastoral and counseling as a profession. Uh, how has the change happened that men are now coming into being counseled? What have you seen? What's been the shift?
I just think that men in the church are becoming more interested, but it's becoming more acceptable for at least some men to ask for help or to realize that they don't have to carry the burden all on their own. I think that I'm seeing an encouraging uptrend in men reaching out for help. I have a caseload of about 30 people every week, and half my caseload right now include men. A lot of, I would say 12 of those are men in and of themselves. And then I do a lot of couples counseling. I specialize actually in infidelity, mostly men who have strayed from their marriages. And so I see a fair amount of couples as well. And of course, the men are involved in that.
And are you seeing more openness from the men that you're counseling?
For the most part, yes. What I'm seeing a lot in a lot of men are um, just repressed expression of men and emotions. Some men, not all, but some men have a really hard time connecting with emotions in themselves and then expressing those emotions to others. And so a lot of men are disconnected from themselves, which means they're disconnected from others.
And how bringing that across to them with the scriptures? Oh, what's the technique that you use?
Well, here's how I try to help them to embrace uh, masculine courage, healthy masculinity. I use King David. I love King David. I would say King David was a masculine man, obviously a warrior king. He fought hand-to-hand combat in many battles recorded in the scriptures, and nobody would call King David a weakling or or a wussy, if you will. He was a bad, bad man, and you did not want to take him on uh, in hand-to-hand combat on the battlefield. Um, at the end of his life, King David, it's said that, and David slept with his fathers, and he was buried and slept with his fathers. So King David retired undefeated on the battlefield. Um, he was a bad, bad man. And yet, when we read the Psalms, we see a very emotional King David. He expresses emotion in the full range from fearful and sad and depressed and afraid to dancing himself almost out of his clothes in worship before the nation in jubilant excitement. And I think he expressed the full range of emotion. And you see that especially in the Psalms. David was very much connected to his emotional self, and he's called the man after God's own heart. So, what does that tell us about the Father and emotions as well?
Well, God was the creator of emotions,
Yes.
and I think it's always interesting that so many times as men we tend to think we've got to handle yes, we're to go to them, and I love that you're doing this and being able to get men to openly talk, and you're doing a lot of couples counseling.
A lot of couples counseling.
Sometimes people come on their own side. How do you get them to start to listen? What's the key to getting couples to listen?
Well, first of all, listening is the number one most important communication skill. Um, you're not wrong in that when I first talk to or meet a couple, almost 99% of the time, they'll come in and sit down and say, "We need help with communication." And I always say it to them like this. I don't think you need help with communication. I think you need help with connection. They're communicating just fine. They're just doing it very, very poorly, and they're doing it destructively or harmful to the marriage. So they need to learn how to communicate to connect. And so I teach them number one skill for good communication is listening. If you can't listen, you're not going to be a good communicator. Then I teach them about at least two of the different kinds of listening. One is the listen to persuade versus listen to understand. In communication, especially as it goes back and forth between two people, they're often trying to persuade the other person to hear their perspective or hear their angle or hear what they're trying to get across. And you get that back and forth of two people communicating, but they're not hearing one another. That's communicating to persuade. No, no, you don't get it. You should see it this way, or no, you're wrong. It's this is going on instead. Versus listening to understand, which is about asking questions. Tell me more about that. Tell me why you see it that way. Tell me what is going on with you right now. Help me understand what you're trying to say to me. That's a very different kind of listening in that I'm trying to understand the person rather than trying to persuade them to see things my way.
So one of the things I've seen in years of pastoring is couples that have um, distanced themselves after their kids have left home. They like didn't know each other enough before they became nesters. What's your advice before people become empty nesters to prevent that from happening?
Well, one of the things that I teach all the couples that I work with, especially in what is the biblical purpose of communication, I believe the biblical purpose of communication is to build a best friendship.
Mm.
And if a married couple, one, if they're not, if they didn't start out as friends, which a lot don't, some do, they haven't built a friendship where they just, and here's how I define friendship. I'm best friends with my wife. We've been married 35 years, celebrated that a couple weeks ago, and she truly is my best friend. We have an amazing marriage. I'm blessed to have such a godly woman and just a friend. But here's how I define friendship. I just love being in the room with her. I just love being around her. I enjoy seeing her, being able to sit next to her, just to be near her is something that I is really satisfying to me. We can hold hands, we can, sit next to one another and not even really be saying anything to one another, or we could be talking, but I just like being around her. And so, that was a relationship that's been cultivated over the years, but it's been intentional. Of course, I say date your wife. We have dated, I've dated my wife my entire marriage. I'll never forget the very first time after our children were born, and we had four kids. Our son is 10, and then we have 9, 7, and 4. And I booked a cruise for my wife and I to go on our 15th anniversary. And I'll never forget the reaction of my kids. They were indignant. They were like, "You're going on a trip without us? How dare you go without us?" And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, time out. Mom and I are going on this trip because we need to spend this 8 days together. We need to have time to ourselves for our marriage and for each other. We love you guys." And they're like, "Well, then, if you love us, then when are you taking me on a cruise?" So, but I was teaching my children the importance of making
I think that's
making the marriage a priority. So here's how I also communicate that to couples. I think the Bible teaches a marriage-centered family. Make the marriage a priority. If the marriage is healthy, the family's healthy. Because here's the thing, the couple, the couple are a family. We add kids to the family, but the couple is a family. They start out as a family. Leave the mother, father, cleave to your spouse, become one flesh. So too many families are making what I call the child-centered family, where the children's schedules, the children's needs tend to overtake and run the family. And that's easy to do, but it's a very slippery slope to be neglecting the marriage, which is what I see a lot of couples doing. And they think they're doing a good thing. They're being good parents, raising their families, doing all of that well, but they're not making the marriage a priority. And I believe, in the way I say it is, you know, uh, marriage is meant to be permanent. God says permanent, but children are temporary. They come into the family, they stay for a while, and eventually they leave and they go start their own family. So it has to be a marriage-centered family in order for the marriage to be healthy and to stay healthy, for the couple to stay connected. And eventually, when the children are gone, they're still friends and they still have a life together. They still have a purpose of enjoying one another.
the the next thing I want to talk through is grief. Um, as a pastor, we have to counsel people that have had loss. And one of the things I keep on coming across is people who continuously grieve to the point where the person has become like an idol. They can't ever get past. Their decisions are based upon that person that passed away.
Yep.
What is your advice to pastors how to counsel a person that just cannot move on and they're idolizing their past loved one?
Yeah, that's a definition that I'll you memorialize them, where you've put them into a place of almost uh, worship, a weird form of worship, if you will. Um, so I mean, clearly grief is the biblical word for grief is sadness. So, should we be sad that we've lost a loved one or lost a very important person in our life? Absolutely. It's appropriate to be sad. Um, but learning to live again, learning to move forward, or, you know, we avoid things like get over it. You need to move on with your life. No, we want to still hold that person in a very special place in our memory, but we want to move forward with our life, and embrace what it is that God now has for us, without that person no longer in our life, and that's not an easy task to do. Um, I have a dear friend of ours who uh, she lost her husband unexpectedly. He went on a bow hunting trip. He'd gone on the bow hunting trip for years, same week every year, loved to elk hunt with his bow. And this particular year, he decided to go by himself because the person that he normally went with bailed on him and he couldn't go. He called around, even called me and asked me if I wanted to go, and I couldn't get the time off from work, but he eventually ended up going by himself. And while there, he passed away unexpectedly from a massive heart attack. So he was due to come home, and he didn't come home. And then a search took place, which took about 4 or 5 days to eventually find him. And of course, it was a very disappointing find. But she coined a phrase, the only way is through.
Mm.
So for her, the grief journey was, don't go under it, don't go around it, you got to go through it. And so she hashtagged all of her social media posts as and she grieved openly online, which is fine, but she would hashtag the only way is through.
Mhm.
So moving through grief rather than trying to mismanage it, suppress it, deny it, not deal with it. Um, so grieving by embracing the grief, but also learning when you need to take a break from it, because grief can be very intense, very heavy, very painful. So you can't stay stuck in the grief all the time. You've got to learn to breathe and move through, and I say move forward and embrace the life that the Lord now has for you without that loved one. It's a brutal journey. There's no doubt about it. It's not easy.
No. For the person that is struggling with a form of idolatry, grieving somebody, what is your best counseling advice for that person? Is it
Go ahead and embrace the grief. It's okay to feel the sadness. It's okay to remember the person that you're grieving because you'll be living in the past, so to speak. But then, in order to move forward and move through the grief, we need to be able to also embrace, uh, you know, the the positive side of grief, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um, because there is a positive side to grief. It helps us to rearrange our priorities. We learned that, of course, I mean, there's nothing like death that'll make you face reality, your own mortality, and even your misaligned priorities. Um, so grief has a lot of positive things to teach us if we're willing to learn. And ask the Lord to show us how to realign our priorities if they've been misaligned, how to line up our relationship with Him in order to think about and embrace a future where we can smile and also share the memories of our loved ones. We want to carry their testimony forward. We want to be able to tell people who they were and what they meant to us, but share about their life legacy in a positive way, so that others can feel like they also might. Well, you've heard the phrase, "Oh gosh, I wish I could have met him. He sounds amazing," because of the way you're grieving and describing this person.
Yeah,
They wish they could have met him, if that makes sense.
makes perfect sense. Uh, One of the things that we're seeing more and more in the church is church hurt.
Hmm.
As a counselor, how do you help a person get to the point of forgiveness?
Well, first of all, we need to define church hurt. What do you mean by that? Because I have a definition of it, but I don't know that a wide definition is the best definition per se.
Can be just from my the whites, those who have been hurt by pastors or hurt by individuals,
Okay, so
false expectations,
yeah.
to actual abuse. So, but often it's God who gets judged,
Hmm.
not the people involved, and then there ends up being a level of unforgiveness that takes some counseling. And so I often on church her YouTube channel because it's a serious issue that people need to know that Jesus never hurt them. It's
Right.
sinful people.
So here's my definition of church hurt is when when spiritual authority has been abused.
Mm,
Is how I would phrase that. And through church leadership, a pastor or a director of some kind, or somebody who's been given authority in the church body by the pastoral staff or the denomination or the you know but there's some level of authority that gets abused or misused. So that would be my definition of church hurt. So first of all, you've already used the word abuse. We need to be able to define church hurt, the misuse of authority or the abuse of authority, as just that, spiritual abuse. Acknowledge what has happened to you, and call it by its name. It's been spiritual abuse. Second of all, we want to separate the abusive spiritual person from the character of God, as you also mentioned. The way I say it is, Jesus said, follow me. He didn't say follow my followers,
Mm.
but also Jesus has never mistreated me. I was a pastor for 15 years. I've been in ministry. I'm an elder in my church currently. So, there, I've experienced church hurt. I've experienced attacks on my character, my person, all of that as a leader. And yet I know Jesus has never mistreated me. His people have. And of course, you can look throughout the scriptures. Moses had a stiff-necked and obstinate people. Um, Joshua and Caleb had to deal with uh, unfaithful people afraid to enter the promised land. There's all kinds of examples of disobedient people, but Jesus has never mistreated me. And so we want to focus on, God's character versus the behavior of God's people, so to speak. So first of all, we call it abuse, focus on the right character of God. Second of all, or third of all, we want them to, I say it like this, you get wounded in unhealthy relationships, you're going to heal in healthy relationships. You have to relearn how to attach, trust, and connect with a person again, a spiritual person again, but a healthy one, a safe person. Typically, not necessarily in the church, because if you've been wounded in the church, you don't want to go to another pastor or another leader. So that might be a counselor or a mentor or somebody that is a safe person. And I define safe as someone who will listen without judgment. They're going to do that, listen to understand. Tell me what's happened to you. Tell me how it's affected you. Tell me how it's changed your thinking. Tell me how it's caused you to stumble and struggle in your relationship with God, where we're seeking to hear the person's hurt and understand where they're coming from. And then we help them to retrust and heal in a safe, trusted relationship.
All right.
And then usually when we want the fourth step to heal, get them plugged back into their spiritual disciplines. Because usually when someone's been hurt by the church, they go astray, or they lose interest in spiritual things. They stop reading their Bible, they stop praying, they don't do the spiritual disciplines because they're mad at God, or they're hurt, and they just don't want to do spiritual stuff. So as they heal, if they need to, we need to get them plugged back into their spiritual life, the life that a lot of people abandoned. And so we got to get them connected back into spiritual life.
Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking your time out with us today.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
I, if you're listening to this and you're struggling and you need some help, it's great to ask for help. People like Jeff are out there to help counsel and help point you in the right direction. And it's not weak to ask for help. I hope this helped everybody that listened to us. Thank you again, Jeff. God
You're
bless.
welcome, Christian. It's so good to see you. God bless.